This video, we're going to be introducing the onStep method, which is super exciting. Really, really cool stuff in this video. Let's zoom in over here a little bit. And so to talk about the onStep function, we're going to have to define an onStep function inside of our program. It doesn't take any input. And in here, maybe I want to make something like a circle at 200, 220. And let's see what happens when I run this program. I made a circle in the middle of the screen, radius of 20, and this doesn't look at it like anything crazy, except something interesting just happened. Normally, hopefully you're noticing this, when you define a function, it doesn't automatically run. Normally you'd have to call onStep to make it run. But in this case, you didn't need to do that. Now there is, just as a side note, an onSteps function, which you can put a number of steps you want to take, and it'll do that many times. You can use that for testing. Oftentimes you'll want to do app.stop after that. Not that, is app.stop an error? Yeah, no. I wasn't sure if it was pause or stop or whatever. But that's a side note, right? The main point that I want to get to here is this onStep function. When I run the program without calling it later on, it's running. It's running on its own. And that's because the onStep function is a special function that is going to run automatically over and over and over, forever, to infinity, a certain number of times per second. It defaults to some number of times per second. I don't know what their default frame rate is. You can edit that, but that's for a later video. But let's just see this instead of just making a circle. So what this is doing is making a circle, a couple times every second. It's creating a new circle, which isn't really doing anything because it's just one circle in the middle, right? But we can use the fact that the onStep function gets called automatically over and over and over a certain number of times per second to do all sorts of stuff. So for example, maybe what I'll do is I'll make a count label up over here, and I'm going to set it equal to a label, and I'll start at 0, put it in the middle of the screen, and I'll make it a decent size, maybe size equals 40. And I held this inside of a global variable so that when I'm in the onStep method, I'm able to access it. I'm able to touch that variable and get information from it. So I'm going to say count.value. The value is whatever's the first argument of it. It can be a word, it can be a number, and I'm just going to say plus equals 1. And watch what happens now. Instead of just making a circle and making a circle over and over, what we're doing is I made a label called count starting at 0, and then in the onStep function, every time this function gets called, it's going to add 1 to the value of the counter. And when I run it now, you should see, I don't know how this is going to show up in the video, a number just kind of going crazy up here, right? You can try to figure out the number of times the onStep function gets called per second on my machine, but I just paused it right now. In that amount of time, it got called 392 times. And this is like super, super cool stuff. There's so much you can do with the onStep functions. But the base idea is that it's just a function that automatically gets called, and you can do whatever you want inside of it. Here, we made a counter, and we're counting up from there, right? We could also do something like maybe I'll just call it like a name, and I can say Adler in here. And instead of doing the count of value plus equals 1, I can take my name object, which is a label that just says my last name there, and I can maybe say dot rotate plus equals 1. And what that's going to do is now instead of changing the value where I'm counting up every time, I'm just going to slowly change the rotation by a tiny bit each time. And so now, maybe it's rotation. Do labels not allow? You can't rotate labels? Really? Let me try like a... Really? Am I doing something crazy here? No attribute rotation or rotate. All right, well, maybe labels can't be rotated. That seems insane to me. Let's try a rectangle, except we'll call it like my box, or we'll just call it box equals rectangle at 200, 200 with a width of 50 and a height of 50. And we'll say box.rotation plus equals 1. Am I going crazy? What's going on here? Rotation. Rotate. Oh, it's rotate angle. Okay. Let's undo this a little bit. No shame in not remembering every single thing entirely. Rotate angle. And now, look at that. So we have a label. I'm Mr. Adler. And on step now, instead of counting the value up every second, or multiple times every second, we're changing the name.rotate angle +1, and it's spinning around. If I don't make this go faster, maybe I could do +5 every time the function gets called, and it's going to spin a little faster because however many times a second that the onStep function is automatically called, now I'm adding 5 to the rotation angle as opposed to just adding 1. What else do I want to talk about? You could also move it, right? Now we're starting to see we can do all sorts of things. And we can potentially, instead of doing name.rotate angle, I could do name.center x plus equals 5. And maybe I'll do plus equals 1 just so it doesn't run off the screen. And if I run it now, well, I can, every second the step function is getting called automatically. And so it's slowly going to move my object off the screen to the right. I'm realizing that my image is mirrored, so it looked like I was going to the left. Whatever. It's my right over here. You could do all sorts of things. We could try name.size plus equals 1, and now the image is going to get bigger and bigger automatically. We've already seen a lot of this, but it always had to be on mouse move or on mouse drag or maybe on key hold. This is now, it's happening automatically. So it's not like the program can now go do things in, using time as a way to measure how it should be moving, as opposed to waiting for you to move your mouse or for you to press a key. It can just start doing things. So I'm not going to get any crazier than that for this first video, but the onStep function gets called automatically a bunch of times every second, and you can do all sorts of stuff that we're going to be exploring in the next, future upcoming videos here.